His remaining in Jerusalem during a time when he should have been at war, is what provided him with an opportunity to see Bathsheba in a compromised position. In the second verse of Samuel, the scripture tells us that one evening a beautiful woman was bathing on her roof, and that King David saw this woman. Now, David clearly didn't know who this woman was because he sent someone to find out about her for him. And upon this person's return, David found out that this woman's name was Bathsheba, and that she was the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So the issue was not King David's seeing this woman. The issue was not him seeing her bathing on the roof, nor was the issue David's desire to know who this woman was. Both of those issues could have been overcome. The issue was still David's presence in Jerusalem at that specific time. Because he should have been far away from his kingdom, making war with his enemies, which was the season for him to do. And that would have prevented this chance encounter taking place to begin with. The Bible tells us that Uriah was offered war with the enemies of the king, as was the season, which means Uriah was in order. As the story progresses, we're given a glimpse into the heart of the obedient, but not before we are shown that sin, when full born, does in fact equal death. For after David learned of Bathsheba's wifely status, he still sinned for her. He still slept with her, and then sent her home to wait for her unsuspecting husband. It's then and only then that this story becomes one that opens the reader's mind to the reality of man's broken mental state and the subsequent inherited sinful nature that follows. So far, we see that David's being in the wrong place at the wrong time, based on his own will, produced an encounter that was born out of pure lust. To compound this problem, the lust is focused on a married woman who happens to be the wife of a man that seems to be in order, as his location is on the battlefield, where order has dictated he be. At the same time, Bathsheba has become pregnant, not by her husband, who is away doing things decent and in order, but by her king, whose very presence in Jerusalem during wartime is completely out of order. So here's where the Bible provides us with a stunning duality as to David's actions, which seem like the behaviors of a devil and less like that of a king, while Uriah's behaviors seem less like that of a servant and more like that of a man worthy of kingship, even if only in the eyes of simple men. I say this because upon learning of Bathsheba's pregnancy, David sent for Uriah. When Uriah answers the call of his king and returns to his kingdom, David wastes no time in an attempted cover-up concerning his actions with Uriah's wife. And why wouldn't he, when God has made it clear through Moses in Exodus chapter 20, verse 17, that no man is to covet his neighbor's wife? Why was this done? One word: order. God is a God of order, and we know this based on all that is contained within the Bible. We also know this because God is love, and his love, as is the case with our own, is best understood and appreciated when in order. So David, who was already out of order in many ways, continued down that disorderly path by first making small talk with Uriah concerning the war, and then asking for Uriah to return home to his wife. David had an opportunity at that moment, before asking Uriah to return home, to tell Uriah about his encounter with Bathsheba, Uriah's wife, but the king chose not to. Now, for me, this had to have taken a deceitful presence within King David's heart. David would have also had to consider that Uriah would sleep with his wife, and that this could put the question of her pregnancy to rest. Well, at least with most, if not all, because a few would had to have known about David's encounter with Bathsheba. But even they might believe that the child within her was in fact of her and Uriah's creation, and not David's encounter with Bathsheba. What other reason would he have had to tell Uriah to return home without telling him about the encounter? Does this mean that King David was willing to cheat one of his heirs out of their birthright? Was King David prepared to watch his own flesh and blood be raised outside of the palace and as the seed of another man in order to keep his encounter with Bathsheba a secret? We'll never know. But what we do know is that Uriah, being a man of order, seemingly a man of honor, did not return to his home, and that he did not sleep with Bathsheba that night. When David asked Uriah why he didn't return to his wife, Uriah gave an answer that had to grip David's very soul. Uriah told David that as surely as he lived, he could not go into his own home, eat and drink in his own home, and make love to his wife in his own home, while the ark, Israel, and Judah are all staying in tents. He said as sure as he lived, while Joab and the king's men were camped in open country, he could not go to his own home. How could this answer not bring anguish upon a good man's heart? Despite the previous transgressions, that answer, when given to King David, spoke to Uriah's loyalty and devotion to the king and his kingdom. Not only that, Uriah slept with the servants that night at the entrance to the palace, the same palace that his wife just became impregnated in by another man. A man that happened to be Uriah's king. Needless to say, the disorder that started with the lust eventually gave birth to murder, as David, who could not get Uriah to return to his home while his countrymen were at war, sent word to have Uriah placed on the front line of the battle for no other reason than for him to be murdered. The king wanted Uriah's life to be taken, and his will was in fact done. Uriah fell in battle. Uriah, a man who would not do what was not in season, a man who remained orderly despite his king's attempts at manipulating him, a man that just wanted to serve his king, his country, and his God, was murdered by that same king.